Open the podcast bay door as hell.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 192 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. This is the penultimate deep dive episode for Agatha All Along. I want to get to that conversation as soon as I can, but I'd be remiss if I didn't do a monthly shout out to my patrons. So thank you again to Mike Sterling, Justin Bailey, Lillian Sam Breen, Jesse Clark, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Aaron Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Julio Herrera, and Matthew Saint. And if you want to join in with helping the show out, it's just $1 per month, and that gets you this monthly shout out, as well as audio outtakes and full scripts of every written show. In this episode, I mention Johnnie a few times as a tarot expert I went to. I want to thank Johnnie Breen for his contribution in answering my questions and providing me with the knowledge on the tarot. Anything I got right is thanks to him. Anything I got wrong was purely my mistake. For instance, in the show, I refer to the Rider-Waite deck. I misspoke, as that should be the Rider-Waite deck, or Rider-Waite-Smith deck, originally published by the Rider Company, with input from A.E. Waite and art by Pamela Coleman Smith. Okay, with that all out of the way, let's get started. Joel has a medical procedure coming up, which may prevent him from showing up in the final deep dive, but as you'll hear, he's gonna do his best.
I want to be a part of this last double episode.
Yeah.
Good
yeah,
God.
I totally understand.
These last couple episodes have been getting better and better and better.
And I just saw on Blue Sky recently also getting a bigger audience.
Good.
The most recent episode, this episode that we're going to talk about, had a 15% increase over the premieres.
Okay. So people aren't just jumping in on episode 6. They're catching up and then watching as it premieres.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Because this is not a good place to jump in.
Oh, no. Do not start with this episode. Because timey-wimey.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. I love this episode so much.
Oh, me too.
This episode, I finished watching it and I was like, I want to rewatch the entire season before Saturday, and I couldn't. But it was like that's effective. You know that a clump of media, or whatever I guess one might call it, is really good when you're still thinking about it 48 hours later. And not
Absolutely.
Just because we have a podcast to do, but
because it affected you.
Yeah.
And, sorry, Londo. I didn't get to watch the whole season again either, but yeah, it definitely put me in that, I want to rewatch and see how it all fits in. Also, what I would really enjoy is an alternate cut of this episode.
In chronological order?
In chronological order.
Yeah,
yes.
There are parts of it that wouldn't make sense that way.
That's true, but at the same time, I don't want to watch it necessarily to get the story, but I do want to watch it in that order to see how, Jen experienced it.
That was specifically what I was thinking. This episode was so much an exploration of the relationship between Lilia and Jen, as well as Lilia's story on its own. There are arcs all over the place, as well as closing loops all over the place.
Oh, yeah. You close the loop on Lilia, basically.
Well, yeah. But
sadly,
also some mysteries were not necessarily solved, but their solutions were revealed. To me, this kind of felt like, okay, next episode is going to be the big battle, and we have to close off everything so that you are ready for that, if it were following the structure of previous Marvel television shows. I hope that that's not the case. I hope they're not going to do the, okay, we've got a huge battle here with a ship of Theseus monologue in the middle, but other than that, this is just a 45-minute battle sequence. I hope that's not the case, because I don't think that fits this show, but it feels like that's what this episode led into.
I can understand that, but also, if there is the big bad of the final episodes.
There's some question marks that we'll be discussing over the course of the next couple hours.
Because obviously the Seven are no longer the threat.
Most of them.
Okay. You apparently observed something I did not.
And we'll get there at the end of the episode.
Yes. But before we even start the episode, we have to do all the previously on.
And there is a lot of previously on, and boy, oh boy, is that a lot of Lilia.
Yes, my notes say previously on Lilia's turn.
Yeah,
then
and
Billy.
Especially if, the first time you watch this episode, you think she's dead.
You know, I kind of assumed that she and Jen would come back somehow before the end. Their deaths,
heavy air quotation marks,
in the Billy episode, or at the end of the sleepover episode.
Yes, that's a better way to put it.
So their deaths at the end of that sleepover episode were so anticlimactic.
Yeah, it very much felt unsatisfying as the end of their stories.
Exactly. And we had seen that Agatha survived, and so it only made sense that we would see them again in some form.
Agreed, and the way that it played, I have questions. But it was very much a, wow, that's a lot of Lilia. Wait, she's not dead. Yay, she's not dead. And then the episode happens.
Yeah.
This episode, among other things, it made me really want to consume more clever uses of time travel media. It reminded me very much of the book The Time Traveler's Wife, which, there's 3 versions of that story out there. There's the book and the movie and the Netflix, Amazon? No, it was Max, HBO show, but that only got 1 season. I have not seen the show yet. The movie was decent. The book was great. If you enjoyed the way that this story played out and the jumping back and forth and all of that stuff as the mysteries were being resolved, I very much recommend that book.
Okay. There was a comic book that it specifically reminded me of, or a comic book character, I should say, and I went back and re-listened to my own episode. The New Warriors, the first volume of it is basically split into 3 25-issue runs. The first 25 issues are Fabian Nicieza and Mark Bagley. The second 25 are Fabian with Derek Robertson on art. And then the third is Evan Skolnick and Patrick Zerker. And Evan Skolnick added a character in that third section called Time Slip.
Okay.
And she literally will leap into her past or future self and see what is happening or what has happened in the past or in the future. And I asked him about the challenges of writing a character like that, especially in a monthly comic from Marvel, where you don't know if you're suddenly going to be taking place in a crossover or your book is going to get canceled.
Sure.
Or so there's some interesting discussion in that episode.
For the listeners, do you happen to know which episode that was?
I was about to pull it up. It's episode 55. It's different for a show like this, where they knew the whole season
Sure.
ahead of time. So that's going to make it a lot easier than for someone like Evan, who talks about some of the changes he had to make, where he was like, so I thought this was going to happen, but then the book got canceled, and so I had to change it to this.
Right.
And so it still looks the same, but it's a completely different context from what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I can see how that would make it much harder to accommodate all of the factors, and very cleverly written stuff here too. And not just written, but
Oh,
props and
absolutely.
sets, and they established things really, really well. And the way it paid off was just glorious.
Yeah. Starting with this very first scene,
Hmm.
because she's falling, but she's in the Glinda costume,
A little disconcerting.
which means this is the very end of the episode,
Yes.
as well as the beginning.
Yeah. We have the previously on that ends with death comes for us all, and then we get the title card, Death's Hand in Mine, and then we have
Yeah.
Lilia falling on this black background. It's just a little jarring.
Well, yeah, it proves the episode title correct.
Yep.
But that's just a very brief bit, and then we cut to Billy and Agatha on the road, where Billy is trying to read Agatha's mind.
And Agatha reminds us that he's always had a problem with that.
Yeah. My feeling is she is a strong enough witch that she
Blocks it.
knows how to hold that off, how to block it, yeah. But she offers to just answer his questions if he asks them out loud.
Well, except for one.
Yes.
Where's Rio? Not that question.
And now she refers to herself as the old babysitter,
Hmm.
and then as mom's ex-best friend. And Billy's response here, I guess I'm going to go back to calling him teen.
That's fair,
Especially because of his his question later in the episode.
yeah, that's totally fair.
But yeah, teen says, she's not my mom. I have a mom. And the way he said it, he felt angry.
Hmm.
And now I'm not adopted, but I've known people who were adopted. I've experienced lots of media with adoption and similar stories. And that seems to be, at the very least, one of the phases that adopted children will go through is an anger at being abandoned. And I wonder how he would feel if he knew the lengths that Wanda had gone to get at least a version of him back.
I don't know. Similarly, I am not adopted and do not have that experience, but I imagine it would be a very conflicted moment.
Yeah.
And possibly a very conflicted couple of years. And some very intense therapy sessions, which he should go through anyway.
Absolutely. And this whole cast needs to sit down with Doc Samson for a while. Who has been introduced in the Marvel Universe, or in the MCU, just hasn't gotten his powers yet.
I don't recall him.
He was in the Edward Norton Incredible Hulk.
Huh.
He is Betty's current boyfriend.
Okay. And they have made efforts to incorporate elements of that movie into the MCU more recently, so
Yep.
that's a thing.
I think it would be great if he suddenly showed up jacked with green hair and no explanation whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what they do. No explanations for anything.
Yeah. Well, speaking of explanations, we get more of this conversation here. And Teen wants to know, is Wanda Maximoff really dead?
I love her. God, she's such a good actress.
Yeah, Catherine Hahn's delivery here is so perfect.
It really is. Yes.
Yes.
No.
No. Maybe.
Maybe?
Did you see a body? Yes. Did anyone else? It's hard to say.
So at this point, is she talking about Agnes of Westview?
I have to assume so. That's the only time she saw the body
Yeah.
was in that episode. And so that's why it's so hard to say if anybody else did.
Yeah. Well, okay. One person she knows saw a body.
Yes,
If Wanda
but they
is
haven't
really
talked
dead,
about it.
then yeah, she knows there is someone who saw it.
This is true, but like I said, they haven't talked about it, so it's still hard to say.
Yeah. I loved her line.
And, yes, we're right on the same tack here.
Hey, you want straight answers? Ask a straight lady.
Yeah, I've heard variations on that joke
Mhm.
since I first was introduced to the LGBT community.
Yeah, I had a friend who, whenever we were driving, she was shotgun, she would always make sure that, turn left here, turn right there, always forward, never straight.
Yes, exactly. I have something else to say on that subject later, but
Sure.
we'll get there. For now, we are at the next trial.
And Teen's response to the vision of what's coming, I think he's just being a petulant teen at a lot of the points in this episode. He says, well, that's different. In what way? Every one of the previous trials started with them seeing a building in the distance and having to walk up and enter it. And they all looked different, so this one's a castle, so what?
It's a much larger structure than the houses that they have seen up to this point. A multi-story castle looking gothic is very different from a modern beach house, a cabin in the woods, a recording studio. It is different.
Yeah, but they're all different.
They are all different from each other, but up until this point, they've all been fairly modern looking structures. And they've all been smallish one-story ones. This is definitely an outlier. If you put those four buildings next to each other in pictures and said which one is most different from the other, you would pick out the castle.
Okay, but if you've been spending time on the road and the road just does weird things all the time, including sending you on trials that involve walking up a path to a building and entering it, this is not going to cause
It's
that
not
reaction.
that different. Fair enough.
Except it gives Agatha an opportunity to piss off Teen.
Well, and then he gives back as good as he gets
That he
because
does.
he wonders something that we have theorized a couple of times now, if Agatha's ever been on the road at all.
Yeah. This was one of those things where it's like, okay, we are definitely closing loops here. The audience surrogate is back. We get our perspective represented by Teen, and we're going to be addressing things this episode. Which, I mean, episode 6 of 9, 7 of 9? 6 of 9?
We're on 7 of 9. I had to make that reference to my tarot consultant earlier, and he was like, wait, isn't that Star Trek?
Details. So yes, in 7 of 9, it's absolutely appropriate to address stuff. Closing loops, this is a good time for that.
Yeah, we are definitely reaching conclusions,
Mm-hmm.
and so it totally makes sense.
And I had read that episode 9 was intended to be kind of a bonus episode, so maybe it's after the story.
I remember you
happened.
mentioned that.
So if the next episode is the conclusion and the rest of it is the afterward, then yeah, we need to be finishing up storylines.
Yeah. Well, we're working on finishing up that storyline, and we're heading to the castle which has the waxing moon on the drawbridge.
I saw that. They did not comment on it this time, but I looked it up.
Yep, me too.
What did you find?
I found that it is associated with air for the 4 elements.
I saw air. Let's see. The waxing gibbous moon, a time of refinement and preparation. It is a time to be diligent, detail-oriented, and mindful of the larger picture while remaining committed to our intentions. That seems a little appropriate for this episode.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, it is good for constructive magic and for giving a boost to projects that may have stalled.
And now we walk into the castle and the outfits.
Oh, man. And most actors that I have talked to or listened to on podcasts or interviews or whatever have all said, when you get into a costume, you really find the character.
Absolutely. Yes.
And the two of them, the moment they are in their Wicked Witch of the West and Maleficent outfits, their behaviors change. And it is awesome.
Agatha's especially.
Oh, yeah.
She is doing things with her body and especially with her face and mouth.
And her hands.
And her hands, yeah. That are completely different from how Agatha normally comports herself.
No, they are very similar to Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch of the West in the Wizard of Oz movie.
Well, I mean, she is based on her, you know.
Well, prove it. Which is the next line. And come on, teen. That's just you being moody. Prove it. Come on.
Yeah, but it does go back to that line or that bit on the screen from the previous episode. So I was very happy that they included that little tidbit there.
Me too. Again, everything about the production of this show has been so clever.
Mm-hmm. And now this is another case where somebody else finds the trial, but Billy gets it started.
Yep.
He picks up that deck and immediately the timer just goes, whoop. Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know this, kind of.
No, you don't.
No.
I'm sorry, Billy. You are not good at tarot.
The horse-drawn chariot.
The horse.
Horse-drawn
he's going to say
chariot.
horse-drawn carriage. Chariot. It's written on the card.
And at that moment, because I paused to write down that line because it was great. And I looked up and I saw that you can really see not only her intense makeup and everything, but also the intense purple contacts that she had in, unless that was CG'd, which is entirely possible, but it made her eyes match the accents on her costume, which was great.
Yeah, I would assume it's contacts because that's so much cheaper than CGIing somebody's eyes to change color.
Right.
So Teen places the first card on the board, and we find out the stakes involved. They finally look up and see this array of swords hanging from the ceiling.
Yeah, oh my god, Sword of Damocles right there. And that set was amazing.
So gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And the ceiling being able to move up and down, and the rotating table, and all of it just...
Props to the set designer.
Absolutely. We get a second card, second sword.
I really liked how the writers gave the audience a crash course in tarot through Billy's incompetence. It was a great way to do exposition without making it feel like exposition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, Seven of Swords. I know this one. It's about deception and betrayal. Check. But it's reversed, so that means the opposite. You're being truthful. Well, that can't be right. I mean, all of that is exposition, but it flows. It feels in character. It just works.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Agatha takes a different approach to the tarot.
Oh my god, she is not in a great place right now.
Well, and she says, she feels like tarot is a con. There's no skill involved. There's no magic involved. And so...
I mean, she's a witch. She lives in this world. She knows divination, witches. She should know better.
I don't know. I have met scientists who will say this specific science is
Bunk.
is bunk. And there are other scientists who are like, no, this is completely valid. I mean, you experienced that as a chiropractor.
That's true.
So I can see a witch who says, no, picking cards out of a deck and coming up with an interpretation of them is just a con.
Right. Yeah. And then Teen's line following her saying there's no magic to it, there's no skill, is again exposition telling us what to expect once Lilia gets in the room. He says that's not true. It's about intuition, knowing which card to pull, and it's about interpretation, divining their meaning.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I spoke to someone who I consider to be a tarot expert.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a massive tarot card collection and occasionally does professional readings and such. And so, yeah, Teen is definitely on the side of tarot readers here. There is a lot of intuition involved. There are those who do more of a rote, this card means this card means this.
Yes, and there are con artists as well who
absolutely
will use this as a tool to take advantage of people, or even Lilia in her job is intentionally not using her power so that she just looks like a fraud and is able to get by.
Yeah, absolutely. As we learn in this episode, she's avoided using her power for quite some time. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Agatha just lays down cards.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
Dunk, dunk.
Almost kills Bill. Almost kills Teen.
And then the ceiling starts to drop down, giving them even more stakes.
Yeah, it was Agatha's
more of an immediacy.
Agatha's turn to tempt the gods of irony. We still have some time, and that's when the ceiling starts lowering.
Yep. And Teen says, I wish Lilia was here.
And that really perked up my ears based on our conversations.
Uh-huh. And if we had a sequential cut,
they would smash through exactly the bookcase right then.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So his powers are in full swing, in a way.
Right.
But we don't get her coming in right here, but we do cut to her.
Yes.
With Jen in the gross tunnel.
And once again, every line is filled with info. This was another very dense scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, apparently Lilia has just snapped out of a very long vision.
Well, potentially.
Yeah, we learn it wasn't as long as I may have thought when I first watched it, but it definitely was long enough that they had been talking for some time, and Lilia had given Jen lots of exposition, and now it's Jen's turn to give it right back.
Again, I'm not sure about the length of her visions. She is not experiencing time linearly, and so she jumps into a place, and in the meantime, where she was, she has a blank spot. So the length of time that she's gone doesn't necessarily correspond to the length of time. I'm sorry, not where she left. Where she arrives has a blank spot because she's occupied by herself from a different time. So
right.
Where she left, the timeline of that is kind of irrelevant to how long she is in a different place. She's just going non-sequentially.
Yeah, but I'm just saying from Jen's reaction, Lilia has been in future mode for quite some time.
Yeah, about 5 minutes.
And this is where Lilia learns that she told Jen that Teen is Billy, who's the son of the Scarlet Witch.
Right. How do you know? I told you.
We're going to get a lot of that this episode.
We are. Now, I was looking at the set of this sequence and all of these weird underground tunnel sequences.
Hmm.
The glowing yellow root system is just kind of odd. Obviously, I assume that that's the trees in the road are pulsing with magic, sure. If we go off of the colors from the Infinity Stones,
Okay.
yellow is the Mind Stone. How much of the road is a mental exercise?
I don't know if we can use the Infinity Stones
I
necessarily
agree. I
as
agree.
a guide. In WandaVision, it did kind of seem like it was that way because red is associated with reality and purple is associated with power.
Mm,
But that's also just how those characters were coded in the comics as well. So that could have been just a pure coincidence.
sure. And we have different colors now too, like the reddish coral color for Alice.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I agree with you. I just thought it was worth noting because the yellow roots were weird.
I feel like they were trying to, specifically because of something later, I feel like they were trying to do like veins on a leaf.
I will ask you about that later.
Okay. But for now, we get our first cut to a previous episode because Jen says you're being extra wispy. Wispy? Kooky. Well, which is it? Am I wispy or am I kooky?
Which that's when I first got the okay, this is reminding me of the time traveler's wife. And we
Mm-hmm.
can see that it's not what I thought Lilia's power was doing earlier, where she is seeing other people's perspective, but it's actually her from a different time
Right.
interjecting in that moment.
Yeah, like I said, it's very similar to the character Time Slip from the New
Mm,
Warriors.
probably an inspiration.
I should check to see if Evan Skolnick and or Patrick Zerker get a special thanks
Mm,
in this episode. Probably not because they don't use that specific character. They are using Lilia Calderu, who is a Marvel character, but it would be nice.
sure.
The other thing it reminds me of course, is Quantum Leap,
Oh, of
but
course.
it's into your own body. You are literally leaping within your own lifetime
Yeah.
rather than into other people's bodies. And then we get the line that hit me hard.
Me too. I had to pause.
Alice, don't
Try to
try to
save
save
Agatha.
Agatha. Oh, I was not expecting that.
No, me neither. Oh man, that one was rough.
Yeah. She was trying so hard to save Alice, but the jump mid sentence completely changed things from our perspective.
Yeah, and from Alice's.
Yeah.
And we learn through this episode that Lilia has had similar experiences in her past where she tried to warn people about things that were going to happen and it never worked out. And that frustration of why do I have this power if I can't use it to help the people I love
Mm-hmm.
is palpable in this moment. And you really get to feel the driving motivation of what brought her to this point in her life.
Yeah. And now we cut to the beginning of her journey. Her very first lesson as a divination witch.
Yeah, and you can see that we start off with the young girl and
Mm-hmm.
her mentor or maestra or whatever.
Which is just Italian for female teacher.
Right. But this pair of people we have seen before in these outfits.
Yeah. She was the girl that she followed in the episode 3 hallucination, and her teacher was the dead woman that we saw sitting at the table.
Yeah, in this same position.
Yeah.
And it was one of those, wait, she was the girl that she followed in that sequence? No wonder she was so disconcerted in that moment.
Yeah, well, and she's screaming later,
She's dead,
they're
they're all
dead,
dead.
they're all dead. And so now we get to learn what killed them.
Yeah.
But before we learn all of that, we find out that she is doing tea leaves as her first lesson. And it's when she looks into the leaves and then that puts them back into the tunnel that I started to associate those vines or roots or whatever with the tea leaves themselves.
Oh, okay. Now that makes sense. Yeah, her maestra is very insistent on the line, "What do you see?" She says it a couple times there. She says it several times later. She's
Mm-hmm.
the Your job isn't to fix things, it's to see things.
I love how Lilia's like, I always was bad at tea leaves.
Right?
No, you weren't. That's something you tell yourself. Always taking the easy way out.
Hmm.
But yeah, we get back into the creepy tunnel through the tea leaves.
Right.
And this is one of those other scenes where it's like, man, I wish we had the sequential cut. Because I was like, wait, the 7 subway station. Okay, this hasn't happened. That hasn't happened yet.
Right. Yeah, don't worry, I haven't heard them since the subway station. I'm talking about the Salem 7. That is a lot for one line.
Yeah. And it makes complete sense watching the episode a second time.
Oh, yeah.
But in the moment, you're like, wait, when? Subway? Who? What?
Which is
Hey.
exactly what we're in Lilia's point of view, and she's that way most of the time.
Yeah.
There are times that she's able to utilize information she hasn't learned yet, but not much, and that's much later when she gets more control of herself.
Yeah. For now, she explains to Jen about her gaps and how she experienced her life out of sequence as a child, and now it's happening again.
And it's getting worse.
Yeah. And her theory is that it's because she's close to the end. Jen is hopeful, saying, of the road? Like your full power is returning?
Yeah.
No. And even if that is the case, Lilia's not so sure she wants it back! These cuts, sometimes they're done for humor, sometimes they're done for dramatic purposes. And no matter which way they're doing it, they get it perfect each time.
Yeah.
This is one of the more humorous ones. She's now in the trial as Glinda the Good Witch, with Agatha on top of her for, no reason that we can discern at that moment.
Right.
And it took me a minute to figure out who Jen was supposed to be.
I saw her as Snow White's evil queen, as the old woman.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus, but because her hair is done in a more, what's the proper way to phrase this?
Elderly African American woman?
Okay. Yeah, it's done in a more traditional African American or African style.
That's true, not necessarily American.
It complements her natural hair consistency and texture, rather than trying to make it look like the cartoon.
Yes.
And so that, and all the freckles and stuff on her as well, that threw me off. But when I saw her holding the apple, I was like, got it.
I totally missed her holding an apple.
Oh, yeah. She's holding an apple later in the scene.
All right, cool. And Lilia accosting Teen, and I thought we were cool. We are not cool, teenager.
Damn, using his full name.
My favorite moment of the episode.
I laughed so hard at that because we've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
We have all been full named by a parent or an adult at some point. And the fact that his full name is Teenager was just hilarious.
Yeah. And then we get one side of a two-way conversation, which I totally dug how they did it.
Yes. And Lilia realizes, hey, wait, you're reading my mind.
Only because it's
Only
so
because it's so
loud.
loud. No offense. And now Lilia remembers Billy/William from the bar mitzvah.
Which you can see the look on his face is just so stricken from that, which is understandable.
Yeah. Now, my question is, with the sigil hiding him,
Is that why he had amnesia?
well, oh, okay, never mind. I was going to ask, is that why he didn't remember her? But then I remembered that he had amnesia from before that moment.
Right.
So then it makes sense that he wouldn't have recognized her when he and Agatha show up at her shop.
I hadn't thought this through before this moment, but it is an interesting question. The sigil hides him from all which kind. When Billy entered William's body, he joined which kind. Is the sigil why he couldn't remember anything before that moment? And when he crushed the sigil, does he now remember?
That's a very good question. We haven't seen any sign of that.
No, we haven't.
That I've seen.
No, I agree with you, but it's a question.
Although it would make more sense for his reaction earlier of she's not my mom. If he now remembers all of William's
past
life, then he would have a much stronger connection to
the Kaplans.
Mrs. Kaplan.
Especially if he does not now remember Billy's origin.
Yeah, how much of Billy is in there and how much of William is in there is a very good question that we're going to get asked later.
Yes. And I love this couplet that happens right now. Jen, aren't you furious? I mean, always, but collectively we've moved on.
That was good. And then when Lilia realizes what they're all wearing.
Yes.
And Jen's like, focus up, Calderu. We can be culturally offended later.
Yes. I love how quickly and seamlessly and believably this show bounces between intense and hilarious. It's just so good.
And staying true to their character. Lilia this entire time has been complaining about which stereotypes and which is in pop culture. And so it totally makes sense that as soon as she sees, what are you wearing? What am I wearing? Oh, God
so
damn it. But we get past that. We focus up and Billy asks, did you cast the sigil on me?
Before that, we have a brief moment that I was referring to earlier of her having knowledge that she doesn't necessarily have yet. She's starting to come into her own. She realizes I was doing a reading and she remembers it was for teen.
Okay.
She says, I was doing a reading for you.
That's true. That is not information she should have, but she does.
Yeah. But she doesn't know all of it because she has to ask what went wrong. And he says, I don't know, you seemed pretty on point. I'm glad you're here now. And her reaction, again, because now you need me. Ain't that just like a witch? But I agree with him later. She was really on point.
Oh, definitely. She was exactly what they needed at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
God. My notes for this episode are practically a transcription of the entire episode.
Mine too.
There is so much that happens in this episode that is so dense.
Yeah, a lot of payoffs,
so much
a lot of
information, so many payoffs. Yeah, it's...
Yeah, so as you say, he asks, did you cast the sigil? And we close that loop. I saw what was going to happen to you that night. I saw who you were and who you'd become. I knew you would need time.
She protected him.
Yeah.
Even not really knowing who he was, she saw enough to say, you're going to need this protection. You need time to start figuring out who you are.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, none of this is part of the trial. Because they get a little reminder, hey, sword, 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 sword.
And of course that freaks her out and she jumps again back to, I hated this the first time.
And then after I hated this the first time, she screams, which is from her first appearance
Right.
episode 2. So it's another moment where it's one long thought that got cut up into 2 different episodes.
Yeah.
And now we're back to the lesson.
In that moment when she screams and Agatha turns to Teen and says, looks like we came to the right place, and Teen says, are you all right, ma'am? She then starts chanting, stop, 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 which did not happen in the second episode. So that was... I did a lot of double checking. I also jumped episodes a few times in my rewatch.
Yeah.
And that was one of 2 times that I can think of right now off the top of my head that did not match up with what we saw. But I think that's... I don't have a problem with this one because it is also a transition to her joining her maestra in the lesson where she is still chanting stop, 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 and she's causing the jumping to cut off.
Yeah. And so Maestra, who we didn't mention it, but it was established earlier that she recognizes that this is the future version of Lilia.
Mm-hmm.
And so she asks about where she is in the present. Are you rooted in nature? No. Are you nimble with your craft? Not really. Do you have a coven? Laughs. Chuckles Riley is the subtitle there. And yeah, Lilia had decided she would rather be that hermit / fraud than face her power.
Mm-hmm. And again, we are reminded that Lilia asks Maestra, please tell me how to control what's happening. And Maestra says, your task is not to control, but to see.
And Lilia's finally starting to get it here. We go back to the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
She knows the next task is tarot.
I love when she gets there and she says, I was hoping I would get to skip this part entirely. Well, you did miss out on the champagne brunch back there. Really? No.
Really? No. And somehow Billy's spellbook ended up down here.
Yeah.
This is probably the most Deus Ex Machina.
Right. Yeah. I wrote down, how the hell did it get down here? Meh, irrelevant.
It was on the road. It flew out of his
pocket
or whatever when they were flying on the broom and landed off the road somewhere, and so sunk down into the tunnels.
Sure. More likely the road figured he wouldn't want it later or something, and so put it in a path that... I mean, the Deus Ex Machina element is absolutely there, but I think that the road itself is influencing how events go in a lot of ways. So it could have been that is the Deus Ex Machina, like literally the God Machine.
So does that mean the road wanted him to get it later? Does the road want you to complete the trials?
I don't see why it wouldn't. I mean, it's putting in obstacles to figure out your worth. And if you are able to get to the end, kind of like Agatha does.
Mm-hmm.
But just because it is putting obstacles in your way doesn't mean it doesn't want you to pass them.
Fair. Hopefully we'll find out next episode.
Potential. Probably not. I
But
think that
probably not.
the idea that this road is like Danny the Road in Doom Patrol, where it is a conscious street, which is Doom Patrol is a very strange show. I enjoyed it.
Based on a very strange comic.
I believe it. I enjoy it quite a bit.
Danny was a very accurate representation of who they are in the comic.
Yeah, sidetrack, but
yes.
I don't think that we're going to have conversations with the road like they do there. I think it's
probably not.
If it is a conscious being, we're just going to kind of have to accept that.
Yeah. So Jen asks, why did her time slips, as I'm calling them, stop?
Because I wanted them to.
Yeah. Well, she ignored them. She put them away because all she saw was death.
Mm-hmm.
Again, bring us back to the episode title.
The episode title, as well as her vision in that first trial.
Mm-hmm.
She's dead, they're all dead.
Yeah.
The child version of her asking her, do you want to see? And then she sees that she gets reminded of the reason she doesn't want to. Yet another PTSD character.
Aren't they all?
Yeah. Well, the interesting ones.
Yeah. Now, time travel is one of my favorite topics to discuss. We have a lot of bootstrap paradoxes in this episode.
Well, yes.
Because Lilia tells Jen we have to find the bookshelf. Jen then tells past Lilia, you told me we have to find the shelving. And now here they find the shelves that get them into the trial. And it's like, who first had that information?
Right. Just for the sake of the audience, because this is an informative podcast, remind them what the bootstrap paradox is.
The bootstrap paradox comes from the phrase pulling oneself up by your own bootstraps, which is, in real life, an impossibility, because you can't exert an outside force from inside yourself. Mm-hmm. It is literally impossible to pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. In time travel, there will be things where something is created or knowledge is learned, but we only learn that knowledge or have that creation because someone in the future brought it back.
Right.
And so if you look at it from a linear perspective, it is knowledge or things that were created out of nothing. There is no actual originator. In an episode of Doctor Who, it gets explained great. There's a time traveler who is a huge fan of Beethoven, has all the sheet music, and goes back in time to get it autographed by Beethoven. Goes back, finds there is no Beethoven. And so says, well, okay, I'll publish it. I'll be Beethoven. But he only has that because it was published way in the past, and he got it in the future and then brought it back. So who wrote Beethoven's Fifth?
Yeah, it's like the idea of a person who invented a time machine goes back in time and gives himself the knowledge of how to make it work.
How to make a time machine. Yeah. And there are ways to get around that, but they involve secondary universes and secondary timelines.
All of which is pre-established in the MCU, but not explicitly indicated here.
Right. Yeah. One has to wonder what the TVA thinks of Lilia's powers.
And Lilia had a maestra. She's not the only one.
Right. There's a whole category of witch dedicated to, they're all named divination witches.
Yeah.
So that is basically 1/4 of the witches out there, if you believe that they're split evenly between the 4 elements that are divination witches, and thus can see some sort of future, past, that sort of thing.
Yeah, there has to be an entire department of the TVA dedicated to them. Somebody gave himself knowledge again. Let's prune that timeline.
But yeah, they find the shelves, they get into the trial, and as we pointed out earlier, it's right when Teen says, "I wish Lilia was here."
Oof, there's Lilia.
Ta-da!
Which does beg the question, how much of this episode and this sequence of events was Teen's magic rippling back in time to make that moment happen?
Ugh. Oh, we'll never know.
Nope.
Let's not even try to go there.
No, it'll tangle your brain.
Yeah. Almost as much as Lilia's brain is tangled when she sees the spread on the table.
Oh, God.
Teen and Agatha point at each other like, they did it. She did it. He did it.
And then Agatha just quickly gets rid of the cards.
And so Teen offers to be the queer ent.
Oh, God. I caught that it was a weird pronunciation the first time, but it was the second time when I had subtitles on that I struck my forehead at that line.
That could be true of most of them, couldn't it?
Yeah.
When Agatha said you want straight answers, ask a straight lady. I think any of these characters could be the queer ent. This is a very queer-centric show.
I hope that they're not intentionally implying that that is correspondent to witchcraft.
I don't think they're putting a causational relationship between the two. I think they're just very strongly pointing at the allegory.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, Billy is the querent, and so he has to ask the question.
Yes, the querent shuffles and cuts. Lilia, we don't have time for this. Shuffles
and cuts. And has to ask a question and then focus on that question, which is very much how tarot readings are done in my experience.
Yeah.
It's not a general reading. It is usually focused on a particular aspect of your life or a particular question you are looking for guidance on.
Yeah. And of course, Agatha is trying really hard to pressure Teen into asking how to escape, which,
yeah,
I mean, it's fun, but it's not helpful.
No.
Also, you've been through 3 trials. You know how to escape. Finish the trial.
Yeah, but she's so anti-tarot that I can understand her wanting to try to take a shortcut.
I agree, and I don't remember where I wrote this down, but the level of derision and anti-tarot and all of this stuff makes me wonder, is it that she doesn't believe in it, or is it that she has been burned in some way before?
I think it's more the first than the second, just in my opinion, my intuition. My interpretation is that this is not an area of magic that she's strong in, and so she wants to deny it being real.
I totally see that. That's very in character.
Yes, that's very Agatha.
Oh, in fact, it was right here that I wrote that down. Proper tarot takes time and care, and she says, and leads to large gaping wounds.
Well, she's talking about the swords.
Yeah.
At least that's how I saw it.
I did. What I wrote down is Agatha talking about the swords, or does she have tarot-related scars that she was covering up with derision earlier? I would tend to agree with you, but the other interpretation also is consistent with how she's behaving.
Mm-hmm. But Teen decides on his own question. As we mentioned before, am I William or am I Billy?
Which was another smack in the gut to me. It's like, damn, he doesn't even know.
No, that's part of his journey.
Yeah.
It's interesting here that he did not ask about Tommy.
I agree with that too.
But he does get a card that hints towards that, although we'll get to it, but
the first one is kind of the bigger of the 2 cards that he gets.
Well, before we get into the individual cards, I've mentioned a couple of times now I talked to a tarot expert. And so let's talk about the safe passage spread.
Okay.
So tarot readings are done in what's called spreads, and you can go as simple as a 1-card spread and just, this is the answer to the question you're focusing on. There are 3-card spreads. The most common spread is called the Celtic Cross.
Okay.
And is set up in a cross formation with different cards in the different locations representing aspects of the question. Now, this safe passage spread seems to be one that was made up for the show. I found no evidence, and Johnny had no knowledge of this spread existing from previous readers. But it seems to be kind of a modified Celtic Cross. It's very similar in that the first card is the Traveler, and then there's cards for the past, and not necessarily the future, but what the ways are to get through the answer to your question and such. So I have a feeling that tarot readers will be adding this into their repertoire of reading types because
it's going to get requested.
Yeah, exactly. When I did my research trying to find for myself if this spread existed, there was a lot of, okay, well, let's all learn how to do this.
Yep.
So yeah, the very first card is the Traveler. The second card is what's missing or the reason for the quest. The third is the path behind, the obstacles you've faced. Fourth is the path ahead. Fifth are the obstacles on your way to the windfall, which is the 6th card. And the final card is your destination. And in Billy's case, his first card, or the Traveler himself, is the Magician.
I love how she even phrases it. You are the magician. You have enormous potential and the ability to make all your goals into reality. Like, well, that tracks.
Yeah, that's... Once he comes into his full power, that's exactly what William Billy Wiccan can do.
Mm-hmm.
But she places the first card and a sword falls. And now Agatha does a little bit more bitching and moaning here. And this was the specific moment where I was like, oh, she's really leaning into the Wicked Witch of it all.
Mm.
Her face and mouth were doing these things. There was like, this is not Agatha as much as it is Agatha channeling the Wicked Witch.
Yeah.
But Lilia is just like, nope, I know what I'm doing. Let's keep going.
I don't mean to question your methods, then don't.
Next, what's missing? And we get the sun, which represents good fortune, joy, and reunion, which, as I said, that is where Teen kind of
perks up
and is like, reunion? Tommy? Are we talking about Tommy?
Mm-hmm. Then we get towards the path behind, but we don't see that card because Agatha tackles her, and we get the jump to Get Off Me.
Right. Which is from episode 2 after they were done singing the ballad. And then it cuts to, and I don't really get this one.
Yeah, this
feels a little off.
I said this is when we get the one jump series that feels truly non sequitur-ish. We jump to the campfire and then we jump to the Desperate Housewives living room, where, we really hated each other from the beginning, but now jump, I love you guys. It felt wrong. It did not flow.
It did. It did not flow as much as the other flashbacks or time slips or whatever you want to call them. I wish we had gotten another line or two of you saved my life.
Yeah.
Something to acknowledge.
The flow of her thought process.
Yeah, because going from get off me to, we really hated each other at first, but now I love you guys feels like a weird cut.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there was another moment in one of the previous episodes that ended up on the cutting room floor.
Almost has to have been.
And because it didn't happen in the previous episode, they couldn't cut to it now.
Right.
Again, these are the challenges of writing that kind of character. You have to include all of them or they don't make sense in certain cases. But once again, after this multi-cut through the recent past, we go back to the far past, and Lilia says, I didn't want to come on this journey.
And then we get this Italian, Sicilian, Jewish moment. Then why did you? To get my power back. Is it gone? Where did it go?
This is not the true reason. And the true reason is one that I think a lot of people can relate to. She doesn't want to be forgotten.
Mm-hmm. And another one of those gut punch lines of, then remember yourself. And then we really get her reasons for forgetting herself. What's worth remembering? That you died, that I saw it coming? Our entire coven wiped out by a fever. I saw it. I told you, but it didn't change anything. Ugh.
Yeah, that's the problem with the kind of power that Lilia has, is that it doesn't seem like she can change things. She'll see the future, but that future happens exactly as she sees it, as she experiences it.
Which kind of points to a single timeline in which the events are set. They have happened.
Yeah. One might almost call it a sacred timeline.
What?
But it's very much like the myth of Cassandra.
I was going to say that as well.
She can see the future. She can tell people about it. Doesn't change anything.
Her curse wasn't that it wouldn't change anything. It was that no one would believe her.
Yeah.
In Lilia's case, I think people believe her. It just doesn't mean it. It doesn't change anything. Or at least some people might believe her, but it doesn't matter.
Right. Her coven is going to believe her, I would assume.
Yeah, one would hope. They're training her to do this.
Yeah, but they don't have the ability to necessarily change it. Or, as Maestra points out, death comes for us all. It's possible that they knew it was coming, they were told it was coming, but they accepted it as part of the world that they live in, the future that they will have.
Which is kind of what Lilia does later in the episode.
Yeah, exactly. But right now, she's asking the question, when will it come for me?
And then she realizes it. I was falling. I will fall.
And Maestra asks the most important question. So what will you do with your remaining time? I was reminded in that moment of the parable of the man and the strawberry.
I don't know that I know that one.
There's a man being chased by a tiger, and he falls off, he runs in it, he ends up falling off a cliff and grabs onto, a little rocky ledge and sees a strawberry vine growing out of the rock. And if he climbs up, he's going to get eaten by the tiger. If he lets go, he's going to fall to his death down this cliff onto the rocks below. And so he takes the strawberry and eats it, because at that moment, all that's left is to enjoy what you have.
And no, I didn't know that one.
Because if you know death is coming, and you know it's coming soon, what do you do with what's left?
Yeah. Lilia jumps to the tunnel.
Yes. My notes say when they first got sucked down off the road, which is unfortunate phrasing.
Yeah,
but...
let's not do that. Um, and Jen asks Lilia what happened, and Lilia's
Yeah.
response pisses me off.
Okay.
The son of the Scarlet Witch telepathically kicked us off the road.
Technically, it's telekinetically.
Damn right it is. That was...
Although he telepathically controlled them for a little bit.
Yes, but he didn't telepathically kick them off the road.
Yeah. It's a common error.
But it's not a common error a witch who knows about telepathy would make.
Yeah, fair enough. I did not notice that, but yeah, that is the kind of thing that I usually will notice it and be like, hey,
Yeah.
get your powers right.
We sank beneath the surface and now we're here, which did lead me to look again at the lyrics of the ballad because it talks about the path and not straying from the path. That was rule number 1, right? So the line in the ballad is, I stray not from the path, I hold death's hand in mine. That sure seems direct and clear. How is there a beneath the road that either leads home or to the next task? That just feels, again, Deus Ex Machina-ish.
I can see that. But you can't have in the ballad it saying, if you fall off the road,
then you get to go home.
Then you get a second chance, and that sort of thing, because then we lose all stakes.
Yes. And of course there's also the question of, wait, where is here? I mean, later, Jen says something about a subway station, but huh? And that's when I remembered Mrs. Hart.
Yes.
When Mrs. Hart was complaining before she believed where she actually was, she said, I am a member of the Westview Historical Society. All I would have expected to see down here were remnants of our failed public transit system.
Yep.
We found it!
And so that's the real world. That's the real underground that they could go to. Or they can take the creepy tunnel.
Yes, let's look at the choices.
Before they decide, however, we get some visitors.
Yes, the Salem 7. And they're walking just creepy. I mean, their hands are interlocked in front of them, but the hood is draped like they're facing backwards, and it's just eerie as all get out.
Yeah, whoever did the makeup, the costume, the choreography, all of that combined, they did such a great job making the Salem 7 as creepy and as disturbing as possible.
Yeah.
But they pass by going, Agatha, gotta get Agatha.
Well, you need a marching chant.
Yeah. And Lilia's like, okay, you can leave if you want, but I really hope you join me, because you're a sister in the craft.
Man, she is going through all kinds of a character arc in this episode, which, of course, there are so many times in various shows in which I have meta moments, and this was one of those. This is, she's going through a huge character arc. She is so dying this episode.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, when they are looking at those choices, and one of them is going home, the pathway off the road into the real world looks vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place it. Do you have any idea what that might have been?
The path to the subway?
Yeah.
I mean, it just looked like a bunch of different subways to me.
All right.
I've been on the LA subway, the New York subway, the Washington DC subway. They're all fairly similar to one another.
Okay, so it just looked like generic subway station.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, it specifically had a W and then Metro, so I assume that's Westview Metro.
Sure.
Because it's underneath Westview. But it didn't look like anything specific to me.
Yeah. I will say, Westview did not seem like a big enough town to justify a subway.
I would agree with you there. The only thing I could accept is if it was the end of a line from a larger city.
Sure. That certainly happens, especially East Coast. That's one of those things.
Yeah, but I would not expect Westview to have its own internal subway system to get around town.
Yeah, there's a reason that this particular public transportation system failed.
Lack of demand.
Yeah.
Now, the trial.
Yes, and you can totally tell that we're going into the end sequence of the show because when she says, I know what I did wrong, the music suddenly got way more intense.
Mm-hmm. And so Lilia realizes that she has to make a reading for herself.
Which, again, this is a moment that frustrated me a little bit.
Okay.
Because she herself was very clear. The querent shuffles and cuts and then asks a question. She didn't do any of that.
Okay. Reasonable. Although
this was the
for
culmination
sake,
of everything, and yeah, I get it.
So I'll definitely forgive it for
dramatic
that.
purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was dramatic.
Now, again, I talked to Johnny about this because I wanted to know if there was any etiquette or rules about reading for yourself. When I studied palm reading, it was kind of frowned upon to try to read yourself. It was more of a you read for others, others read for you sort of thing.
Much like creating broomsticks.
Yes. At least in this show.
Right.
Yeah, there are certain tasks that are specifically supposed to be for yourself, and then there are others that are more external. And so I asked Johnny about this, and he said that it's not necessarily frowned upon, but that a lot of people won't do it because they feel like basically they're too close to the subject, and that it is difficult to avoid putting your own wishes and feelings into it rather than actually reading what is there.
Makes sense.
And so he said that this actually makes it a very good test. It is a good trial of one's reading abilities if you're able to create that distance, if you're able to read the cards accurately without putting your own spin on it because you're reading for yourself.
Sure. And I know that many of the people that I know who dabble in tarot got into it because they wanted to do self-readings.
Right. I can totally see that.
But yeah, those who take it seriously, that makes sense.
Yeah. So, many of these cards we've heard before.
Yeah, and we...
Not the first one, but pretty much all the rest. Not the first and
or
not
the
the
last
last.
one.
Yeah. So let's start with the Queen of Cups. Now, these are all... The images that are taken are modifications of the Rider-Waite deck, which is probably the most common set of cards you'll see. If you are just buying a tarot deck and you're not looking for any sort of theming or connected to some intellectual property, if you just go into Barnes & Noble and pick the tarot deck that is available, it's the Rider-Waite deck.
Okay.
And so it is a slightly modified version to insert our characters into the artwork, which, as Johnny pointed out, I'm surprised this deck was not released concurrently with the episode.
Yeah, I suspect it won't take long.
Yeah, we'll see. Sometimes Disney avoids... Like, I don't think there is a Disney tarot deck that is official.
Oh, that's true. That goes into territory that might offend people.
Right. But I take it back.
Found a bunch, huh?
I found a bunch. Specifically, Villains Tarot deck, a Nightmare Before Christmas Tarot deck, Alice in Wonderland tarot deck.
So things that are slightly sinister and or magic-y,
Yes.
which
Yes.
that totally makes sense too.
Yeah. So the Queen of Cups, which is Lilia as a girl,
Mhm.
as a young woman sitting at the table.
At which point the maestro says, finally.
Empathetic, intuitive, with an inner voice to be trusted. Then we get, for what's missing, the Three of Pentacles, which we heard her mention it in the second episode.
Right, that
And yeah, the design is also from the second episode, later in that episode.
on her
when
eviction
the
notice.
Well, there are three pentacles on her eviction notice. There are three stars there. But the card that she puts down on the table shows the coven singing the ballad
Missed that one.
because it is representing collaboration, community, the singular voices waiting to harmonize. Third, the path behind is the Knight of Wands, and we get to see Alice on the card in full knight's regalia.
I like how they used the image of her saving Agatha with the lights from her hands as integrated into the image on the card. It was,
Yeah.
like I say, everything about this was so cool.
Again, this is the kind of thing you can do when you have the whole season planned
Yeah.
ahead of time. You can get a prop that looks like the moment from earlier in the season.
And at the same
have
time,
it
you can
match up
choreograph that moment in the season to look like the prop.
That, yeah, could go in either direction. Now, the fourth one, we missed this one as being a
Completely.
tarot.
Oh, totally. That moment happened and it was like, God damn it. Oh, man. Because it happened so early in the process that we didn't know to watch for these things.
Yeah, we weren't associating necessarily everything with tarot.
No, I thought she was
And
just
so,
seeing the future of Jen in the coven.
yeah. So, in a way, she was.
True.
Because this is what's ahead. Jen is the high priestess, and Jen is on that card. And she has immense spiritual power, but is unable or unwilling to use it.
Gee, I wonder if that's going to come up.
Then we get the Three of Swords and the
Obstacles.
The cut to Agatha. I love how they've got the three branches behind her.
Which I went back and looked and it was not there. This is the other one that I mentioned that there was differentiation between what we saw and what we now see. But I'm okay with it.
I'm okay with it. And also, this is from a slightly different angle than what we were looking at in the original episode.
True, but there was no tree that looked anything like that in that sequence. This was added later, and that's okay.
Okay. So this is Agatha caring for the wounded teen at the end of the fourth episode. And so Agatha is on the card, and it represents heartbreak, sorrow, and grief.
Those would be the obstacles.
Yeah. And then we get the tower reversed.
In the position of the windfall, which
yes,
is interesting, but you don't realize it until later.
And the artwork again here is so perfect. The card shows Jen and Lilia falling, and the tower has a blue crown on it, just like Billy's. And so when the tower is upright, it represents disaster, destruction, and sudden upheaval, but reversed is a miraculous transformation.
And the way that they saw that and showed it to us, that this was a poster in the background of Lilia's palm reading tent, but the
Yeah.
reversal being that she saw the reflection through her
Crystal
crystal
ball.
ball was so
Yeah.
cool.
And now before we get the 7th card, we do another cut back to even earlier.
The fall and landing in that subway station just looked painful.
Oh, yeah. And Lilia is the first to wake up from that, and there's someone else there.
I could not believe this.
You were so on point.
I had to pause the episode and I actually shouted out loud, "Wait, I was right on the big one?" That never
Sure enough.
happens.
So Rio is death. And they even did the half skeleton, half flesh covered face. They didn't do it split down symmetrically. They did it top and bottom instead.
Mm-hmm.
But they still call back to that Marvel Comics appearance.
And it is the same costume and makeup and effects that we saw hovering behind Maestra in Lilia's vision from that first trial.
Mm-hmm. Although in that trial, the face was fully skeletal.
Yes.
Because they didn't want to give it away.
Right. So yes, she says, "Who's there?" And Rio's, "Don't you recognize me?" And Aaron points out
Okay.
that if we had the sequential episode that you've been asking for this entire conversation, this is very strange for this moment to be Rio's only appearance in the episode. Where'd she go? Why did she disappear? What's going on there? Why did Rio not stick around with Lilia and Jen?
She's got other stuff to do.
I guess. Yeah, she's busy.
Yeah. And I enjoy how Agatha slams the card down because Lilia's too wrapped up in her vision.
Yes.
It's just like, thunk, we don't have time. The swords are like right at their head there.
And this time when she puts it down in exactly the right place. When she was doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo, it was sloppy as all get out.
True. Yeah. As Lilia pointed out, the spread had been massacred.
Yeah.
No, she puts it down in the right spot. The swords come back up, and the Iron Maiden is the door out.
Yeah, that quick everyone in the Iron Maiden is a sentence every witch wants to hear.
Of course, my brain immediately flicked to Bill and Ted.
Sure. Before they go in the Iron Maiden, there's this brief interchange where Lilia reveals that Rio is death and
Yes.
Calls her the original Green Witch.
Which Rio had pointed out
Yes,
earlier.
I'm the Green Witch.
Yes.
And I don't get that part. I looked up the Green Witch and the original Green Witch, and obviously there were already spoilers for this episode, but
yeah, that's the problem with researching after the fact.
Yeah. All I could see is the Green Witch embraces nature by drawing on the energies of the earth and of untamed things. Why is death the original Green? I don't know. And now that line called back to Rio's introduction in the group, I don't know that we're going to get an explanation of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt a little weird.
Well, the only thing I'm thinking of is there's two ways we can interpret Green Witch. We can talk about Green Witch as in being related to nature, or look at Agatha. The Green Witch in pop culture is the evil witch that brings death.
Okay.
And so when she says, I'm not so much a green witch as the green witch, which you did much better than me.
Yeah, but you spared your throat.
That's what she's saying. She's the green witch, the one that you look at and see as green. That's my headcanon there.
Sure. And this, of course, now that we have confirmation of who she is, it brought me back to two interchanges earlier in the show that we suspected, but we didn't know. This is the thing that Rio did not want to do, but had to because it was her job. That's Nicholas Scratch.
Yes.
And way back to the first episode when she asks Agatha, do you remember why you hate me? That's it. That's why.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we've gotten so many Nicholas Scratch mentions that has to come up in these final two episodes. That has to be the resolution between Agatha and Rio, or Agatha and Death.
Yeah.
Now we know that there is going to be another confrontation between the two, because as the seven arrive and Lilia insists that the group leave, she gives basically a final bit of knowledge to each of them.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one to Agatha is, when she calls you a coward, hit the deck. Which is interesting because this is the first bit of knowledge that we're seeing from Lilia
outside her own lifeline.
That is not when she is there.
Probably.
So at the end, she comes into her full power and is able to see outside of herself.
Yeah.
And then Billy gets his spell book back and says, "You're the path ahead, Jennifer."
And then closes the Iron Maiden on her and says, I loved being a witch.
Oh, such a great goodbye to this character.
Yeah.
Like I said, the previous death of Lilia and Jen when they were
just flung off the road.
Yeah, sucked down into the road felt anticlimactic, but this feels right.
Yeah.
This is how you say goodbye to a character. This is how you kill someone off and make it dramatic and not a fridging.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with that term, you can look back at previous episodes of this show.
Yes.
Or listen back, I guess. This show being Welcome to Geektown, not Agatha.
Yes, you can specifically go back to episode 71 and learn about the origin of the term fridging and what it refers to.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lilia says, I loved being a witch, closes the door, and the rat appears. And then Lilia gets her final monologue here.
Which was great.
Yes. When you successfully complete a trial, Snake appears. Like I just did, Fox appears. It's not a good idea, Raven, to overstay your welcome. Usually something terrible happens. And we see the seven in their human forms at that point. Disaster, destruction, sudden upheaval. Like the tower upright. Turn the card over.
And then we get a similar effect to when they were on their broomsticks, where the world flips around.
Yeah.
And I love this solution to the problem of the seven, except for one thing.
Yeah, you mentioned this way at the beginning of the episode.
2 of the 7 can turn into flying creatures.
Okay.
But 2 things. First, this was really quick.
Yes. We don't know how fast that transformation takes place.
And second, when we see the 7 falling and being impaled on the swords, if you count, we saw 5 of them getting impaled.
Okay. I did not count, I assumed.
So it does track, and it potentially leaves us with 2 villains for the final sequence.
Yeah. The Raven and...
Bees.
Yes, the one that the credits call Vertigo. So the room spins upside down. The 5 are impaled.
Right.
And then Lilia lets go and falls and returns us to the beginning of the episode.
This time through the window of the tower. Which,
yeah.
Oh, God. The cinematography on this episode was so good.
It was great. And then Lilia's life, it all is a loop.
Mm-hmm.
Because we fade to black and then we come up to young Lilia showing up for her first lesson. It's such well done storytelling.
It really is.
Of how her path winds out of time. And then we get the perfect needle drop here.
Yes.
With Jim Croce's Time in a Bottle, which is one of my personal favorite songs
Mine
of all
too.
time.
Yeah, I was going to say that. It was fantastic. The team behind this show, every team behind this show did so well. And then we get our ending credits.
Yeah. And we just have one more week with 2 more episodes.
Yeah, at this point, we've seen the first trial's visions concluded for Lilia and Alice. So now we just need Jen and Agatha. We need to learn more about the guy who saw Jen as an inconvenient woman. And
right.
The whole Nicholas Scratch thing is obviously going to come up.
Yes. I assume feature prominently.
One would assume, yes.
Yeah. Which is, it's weird that Jen's is still to come up because we had Jen's trial.
Yes. And it's possible that the campfire conversation where she talked about how he bound her was that conclusion, except he bound her. She is still bound. That's not resolved yet.
Yeah, that's true. We said that when Alice finished her trial, that she came into her power.
Mm-hmm.
She was able to then, in the following trial, use her magic to blast the ghost out of Agatha. But Jen completing her trial didn't return her power to her.
No, but it gave her more confidence in her ability to do magic without her power.
True.
And later when she saved Teen's life from that impaled glass, and Lilia said, Jennifer, look what you did, reinforced that. So maybe her journey is that she doesn't need that power.
That's possible. But they specifically point out that she has immense spiritual power and is unable or unwilling to use it.
True.
So
it'll come up.
Yeah. I mean, she's the path ahead.
Yeah. And if there is a thing to not like about this episode, the one thing I didn't like is that this confirmed that Alice is actually dead. And now so is Lilia. And I loved those two characters so much.
Well,
we don't know what's going to happen with Billy.
We don't know what's going to happen with Billy. And again, I will point out that couplet from the ballad. If one be gone, we carry on, spirit as our guide. When Sharon died, I said she could show back up as a
spirit guide,
spiritual guide. And so, having lost now 3 of them, they could show back up as Mother Maiden Crone.
Interesting. So that would make Alice Maiden, Sharon Mother, Lilia Crone.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting.
And I think very fitting for everything that we've been told.
Yeah. The other question, of course, is now that the 7, or at least 5 of them, are dead, who's our main antagonist?
Death.
You think that the big battle is going to be with Rio? Or against Rio?
I think that when she calls Agatha a coward, Agatha's going to need to hit the deck, and that's going to be, at the very least, how the tide turns in that battle. And so I think there is a big battle coming up, and she is Death. She is Rio. And if that's not the big bad, then is the big bad Nicholas or Mephisto? It feels like it's too late to make a new character the big bad.
I agree. Is it going to be a big battle between Billy and Agatha? I mean, they're kind of leading up to that.
I don't think so at this point.
But I don't either.
It's
one of the question marks that this episode leaves us with.
And we'll have to wait until next week to see if those question marks get fully resolved. If possible, Joel will be back, and either way, Anne, who joined me for both seasons of Loki, will also be showing up to give her own take on the show, so don't miss out. Another quick reminder that patrons get the full uncut version of our talk, and it's only $1 per month to join. And if you want to share your thoughts on the episodes we've discussed, you can email those, or topics you'd like to hear about on future scripted episodes, to welcometogeektown@gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome to, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include Twitter @Geektown Podcast, Mastodon @WelcomeToGeektown at mastodon.social, or Blue Sky at welcometogeektown.bluesky.social. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show, so we can all tell them,
Welcome to Geektown. Population, us.
Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Levitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All of their sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.